you remember we were talking about going beyond technique into just the state of being, right? So that's one idea to consider. Like, when are you really qualified to do that? At what depth of experience does that become appropriate? Because in the discussion, we talked a little bit about the possibility of somebody with hardly any meditation background feeling like they're just sitting quietly and feeling like that's it. That's nice and deep silence, right? So how do you tell if you're actually at a point where it's going to be useful to transcend the technique and just be, versus continuing with the technique? All right. There's a point in which I talk about that you're really in a deep state of silence and stillness. And right on the cusp of that, you're experiencing the techniques. So it's at a really fine, indescribably, subtle and blissful level. It's virtually as if you're in the world of pure consciousness, experiencing the techniques. That's what it feels like. Like you're in that state of samadhi, of pure awareness, and virtually within that, you're having very fine experience. Okay. So what this amounts to is when you have that state where there's deep, deep silence, such that it really, like, you're right on the cusp of pure awareness. And you also have the finest level of thought. Now, the finest level of thought clearly is very powerful. It's not just delicate. It actually is extremely powerful. In fact, you could use the analogy that it's like the subatomic powered level of thought. Okay, so it gets, just like this material world, you go from the surface where it's basically inert, and you go molecular level, there's more activity, more dynamism. The atomic level, there's more dynamism, more power. And then the subatomic level, like intense, really intense, amazing power at that level, right? And so the whole structure of the mind kind of mirrors that, in that there are these subtler and subtler levels. And a very clear experience at a very fine level is literally like subatomic powered thought. You can get in your thought, when you hear about the first microsecond of creation, and where the whole universe is compacted into an infinitesimally small point of, immeasurable heat, and which is to say immeasurable energy, right? So at that's literally like the level of thought you can get. It's incredibly powerful. So this is the fullest value of silence, and the fullest value of, you could say, dynamism, because it's got so much potential dynamism. It's like that first instant of creation that has all that dynamism within it. Okay, so that's the fullest value of dynamism. So when you have those two together, I like this analogy. Actually, my first teacher, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, talks about this. And he gives a wonderful analogy of, it's like two wrestlers coming together, and they're equally matched. And they come together, and as soon as they grasp each other, they're both in the peak of alertness. Okay, that in that moment, they're in their peak of alertness. And if they're absolutely infinitely matched, then it's like there's no movement, because they're perfectly infinitely matched. And you could say they cancel each other out in a sense. And what the result is, in the case of the silence, with the infinite silence with infinite dynamism, is then the unmanifest. It's like infinite silence, infinite dynamism. They hide or cancel each other in a sense, or neutralize each other. And then you have that state of perfect emptiness, the great void, the unmanifest, whatever you want to call it. So that is actually as close to that state as possible, is the point at which it becomes very beautiful and perfect to simply be rather than do a technique. So when I said it was perhaps premature a little bit last week when we talked about that to discuss the idea of simply being, yes, it's premature until you can get that what I just described. However, in the meantime, as we're moving towards that, we can have some glimpses. And so it's fine to enjoy those glimpses, but don't get stuck there. Okay. Here's another kind of metaphor. If you think of the journey to enlightenment as entering this beautiful garden, and let's say it's a very extensive garden with all kinds of little sub gardens, and it's kind of maze-like. So it's very wonderful garden. And let's say you get to a certain beautiful side garden and you enjoy that for a while, but you don't want to just stay in that. You can enjoy it, but then you want to keep on moving. And so that's where we're at. You get some degree of silence when you transcend the practice. And if it's really engaging and it feels compelling to you, you can enjoy it. And if it is indeed pretty powerful, you'll feel the physiological effects of that, like I mentioned last week. You might even feel like pressure on some part of the head or in the heart. You'll feel some sensations of the prana filling the nadis, that kind of thing. And so that's good. And you can allow that to happen for, whatever, a few minutes, and then come back to the technique. And again, the purpose of coming back is to be very delicate with it so that it can be experienced in a finer and finer level. You don't want it to be very gross such that it seems tedious or unpleasant, because it only would seem tedious or unpleasant if it's gross. If it's very subtle, it's absolutely blissful. Does everybody have that experience or have had that experience, right? So if you're at a fine enough level, then it's naturally effortless, it's naturally engaging, it's beautifully blissful, and you want more of that. So you can keep going finer and finer into that deeper and deeper silence and deeper fineness of experience, which is taking you towards that full dynamism and full silence.